What happens if you get left behind in space? Hey everyone, welcome back to the stuff you should think about. I'm your host G, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Usually, we talk about things that are a little more grounded, right? We talk about human behavior, maybe some weird science, or deep dives into psychology. But today, I want to talk about something that hits that primal fear button in the back of all our brains. You know the one, you're watching a sci-fi movie, maybe Gravity, maybe 2001, A Space Odyssey, and you see an astronaut lose their tether. They drift away. The ship gets smaller. Their breathing gets louder, and you're just sitting there on your couch, clutching a throw pillow, thinking, okay, but what actually happens to them? So let's pull up a chair, get comfortable, and let's talk about space travel. Specifically, the terrifying, fascinating physics of being detached from your spacecraft. First things first, let's clear up a huge misconception. When you think of space, we think of a giant vacuum cleaner. We think that if you step out of a ship, you're going to be sucked away into a black hole or whipped around the galaxy like a rogue comet. Here's the truth. Space is a lot more still than Hollywood wants you to believe. If you were to float off the International Space Station right now, you wouldn't be sucked anywhere. You just continue moving at the exact same velocity the space station was moving at the moment you let go. Think about it like riding in your car. If you're going 60 miles an hour on the highway and you hold a tennis ball out the window and you drop it, that ball doesn't stop dead in its tracks. It keeps moving forward at 60 miles an hour, plus some air resistance, but we'll get to the vacuum part in a second. In space, there's no air, so there's no friction to slow you down. You become your own little satellite. You be orbiting Earth just like the station is. But, and here's the kicker, you'd be in a very lonely orbit. So let's paint the scene. You're working on the exterior of a ship. Maybe you're doing a routine maintenance check. Your tether snaps and you drift away. The first thing you're going to notice isn't the cold and it isn't the lack of oxygen yet. It's the silence. It's an absolute bone-rattling silence. In space, there's no atmosphere to carry sound waves. So the only thing you'll hear is the sound of your own voice, the fan in your suit, and, most terrifyingly, your own heartbeat. You've got about 8 hours of oxygen in a standard NASA extravehicular mobility unit, or sometimes called an EMU. That's your ticking clock. If you drift away, your instinct is going to be to reach out or swim through air. Here's a free tip. Don't bother. There's nothing to push against. You're in a vacuum. Swimming like a dog or doing the backstroke in space is about as effective as trying to swim through a brick wall. You're just going to spin yourself around. Let's talk about your suit. This is your personal spacecraft. Without it, you'd be seriously in trouble within about 15 seconds. There's a common myth that if you're exposed to space, you'll instantly explode or turn to a popsicle. That's not quite how it works. Space is cold, super cold. But it's a vacuum. Heat transfer in a vacuum only happens through radiation, which is a slow process. You wouldn't flash freeze. However, the pressure issue is real. The human body is built to exist at 14.7 pounds per square inch of pressure at sea level. In space, that pressure is zero. If you were exposed to the vacuum directly, the oxygen in your blood would start to expand. Your tissues would swell. You'd have about 15 seconds before you lost consciousness because the oxygen would be pulled out of your blood and back into your lungs to reach equilibrium with the low pressure environment outside. But with your suit, you're in a safe, pressurized bubble. You've got a localized source of oxygen. You've got temperature control, which is actually trying to keep you cool because suits get really hot from the sun. And you've got a layer of protection against micrometeoroids. I want to come back to the physics of moving because it's something people often find counterintuitive. If you're drifting away from the station, you're moving in a straight line at the same speed the station had, roughly 17,500 miles per hour. You aren't falling away from Earth, you're falling around it. The station is falling, and you're falling. Because you're both falling at the same speed, you don't feel any gravity. That's the weightlessness. It's just continuous, unhindered free fall. But here's the tragic part. Even in a tiny nudge, the kind of nudge you might give when you're panicking, changes your orbital path. If you push off the ship, you're changing your speed by even a fraction of a meter per second. That small change means your orbit is now slightly different than the station's. The station might pull away from you, or you might start to slowly drift towards it. It's a very slow motion dance. So, you're there. You've drifted 50 feet away. Your tether is floating 5 feet behind you. Just reach out. What do? The smartest thing you can do is nothing. Panic is your greatest enemy. If you start jerking your arms and legs, you're going to tumble. Once you start to tumble in space, it's really hard to stop. There's no wind to stabilize you. You become a human centrifuge. Modern spacesuits, specifically NASA's simplified aid for EVA rescue, or SAFER, actually have tiny little thrusters. It's basically a joystick on your chest. You hit a button and a little burst of nitrogen gas would nudge you back towards the airlock. But let's imagine you don't have a jetpack. Let's imagine you're in a worst-case scenario. You're watching the Earth, this beautiful, bright blue marble, and you're watching your ship turn into a tiny glint of light in the distance. This is the part that really gets me. It's not about physics. It's the essential weight of it. People who have been in space describe the overview effect, that feeling of seeing Earth from above and realizing how interconnected and fragile everything is. Being stranded, though, that's the inverse of the overview effect. That's the isolation effect. You are truly the most alone a human can possibly be. You are a biological entity in a space designed to kill any biological entity. But you know what's weird? If you had to be stranded somewhere, space isn't actually the worst place to be. You aren't suffering. You're breathing. You're seeing stars with a clarity no one on Earth has ever seen. The stars don't twinkle in space, they're just steady, piercing points of light. You see the sunrise and the sunset every 90 minutes. It would be terrifying, yes, but it would also be incredible, hauntingly, and beautiful. I know we're getting into the dark stuff now, but if we're talking about stuff to think about, we have to finish the story. If you run out of oxygen, it's not the dramatic gasping for air death that we see in movies. It's much quieter. As carbon dioxide levels in your suit rise, you'd simply drift into sleep. It's called hypercapnia. You get sleepy, maybe a little confused, and then you lose consciousness. And then you become a permanent traveler. Because space is a vacuum. There's no bacteria to decompose you. If you were in a low enough orbit, the spin, then wisp of the atmosphere would eventually drag you down and you burn up like a shooting star, literally becoming a part of the planet that gave you life. If you were in high orbit, you could drift for millions, maybe billions of years. You'd be a celestial monument. So, after all that, why do we do it? Why do we build these pressurized tin cans and hurl ourselves back into the black? Because we're explorers. That tether, it's a symbol of our connection to home. But the desire to break that tether, to go further, to see what's around the next curve of the orbit, that's what defines us. When you think about space travel, don't just think about the danger. Don't just think about the terrifying physics of drifting away. Think about the fact that we figured out how to create our own little bubbles of air, our own little orbits of gravity and warmth, so that we can stand in the middle of a vacuum and look back at our home. That's a pretty incredible feat for a species that spent most of its history just trying to figure out how to make fire. I hope this helped clear up some of the mystery about space travel. It's not about being sucked away. It's about orbital mechanics. It's not about exploding. It's about pressure in suits. And mostly, it's about the fact that even in the deepest, deadliest void, we humans are still just trying to find our way back to the light. If you enjoyed this episode, or if, like me, you're going to spend the rest of the night looking at the stars and thinking about physics, let me know. Send me a message. Tell me what you're thinking about. This is G, and this has been Stuff You Should Think About. Stay curious, keep your feet on the ground, or at least keep them in a steady orbit. And I'll see you in the next one. Wait, one last thing before I go. Did you know that the International Space Station travels at about 5 miles per second? That's fast enough to go from London to Sydney in under an hour. Next time you look up, remember, someone is moving that fast right now, drinking coffee, looking at the same stars you are. Pretty cool, right? Anyway, catch you later.